Could you break into a stranger's house with an axe and beat the entire family to death and then go on about your life the same as before? No, of course you could not, and I could not. I would be terrified. I would shake in my boots. I would pee in my pants. I couldn't do it. Not that I would want to, but I could not. It required a self-possession, a clarity of purpose, and a suppression of fear that is beyond anything normal. Is it accurate to say that the man who could do this was a coward? Bill James, the man from the train, the solving of a century-old serial killer mystery. Welcome back to this week's episode of the Wellhouse Exorcism. This is your ghost of a host with the most, Shanna.
It's PukwuPJ.
Hey, it's Carrie. I am back.
And we have a brand new guest,
Penny.
Welcome. Yay! This episode will be a two-part series on Lizzie Borden. We'll be taking a deep look into the past, so Victorian ideals and beliefs, societal standards, and the flawed judicial system of that time period. Now, because of the analyses we'll be doing, we would just like to provide a trigger warning before we begin. In this episode, we'll be discussing the possibility of molestation and incest. These are very heavy topics, and we will endeavor to talk about them in a psychological way. However, it may be disturbing for some listeners. So please be warned. Now, references for this evening are AmericanHeritage.com, FamousTrials.com, HistoryCooperative.org, University of Missouri Kansas City Law Site, and University Press of Kansas. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you. Hello.
Hello. Very long intro, but Carrie and I agreed that we wanted to put a trigger warning at the beginning, and then when we go into those topics, there'll be a second trigger warning later.
We haven't needed one of those since Pennhurst.
Yeah.
We're going to need that again after Pennhurst.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we think it's important, too, because we're here to kind of do a different dive into Lizzie Borden with all the current theories. It's because everyone knows that she killed some people. Maybe it was 40 whacks. It wasn't, right? But everyone knows generally the story. And we're not really here to assess if or not she did it. I think she did it. But, you know, it's more to see, like, psychologically why she would have done it.
Right.
Yeah. Which is why we got you and Penny. We need some female discussion here. Sorry, PJ.
Yeah.
You're outnumbered.
By a lot.
Uh-oh.
By some to one. I'm not a math teacher. I don't know.
Well, Penny's retired, so we're all in trouble now.
Yeah.
So thank you guys for being here. Now, Carrie, of course, is our paranormal expert, and you just love all things creepy, so you know a lot about this already.
Creepy. And a serial killer kind of... I can't use the word love. It's so weird. The human brain and why people do it is very fascinating.
You have lots of hours clocked on Netflix serial killer shows, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, who doesn't?
It does relax me. If I'm having like a panic attack, I put on one of those. It's like, at least that's not my life.
Well, like how I was dragging a very big black bag of clothes for donations, and Penny's first comment was, "Is there a body in there?" There could be.
No.
Sprinkle a few baby clothes on top, and nobody will think anything.
They just happen to be red. You know, anyway. So, Penny, you're new to this. We had a serial that we did for school that you were on, but this is new for you for the Wellhouse Exorcism. So, give us a little about yourself.
I don't want to tell. It's a secret.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's all right.
She's hidden, everybody.
I'm one of the Gen X. Every time Shanna talks about when she was young, I giggle because I was married and had a child at that time.
Didn't you start teaching the year that I was born? Or
1989.
Sorry, 2 years after we were born. Okay.
Yeah, that's all right. But I've never grown up. Well,
Good.
I've grown older, but
Yes.
maturity is...
You have to grow old.
Right.
I did
You
not
don't
grow
have to grow
up either. I'm short. But.
Yeah. So, yes, I have been a teacher for 35 years. I started out in college as a psych major. I was going to be a therapist.
And she's my therapist.
And I ended up being a teacher.
Yeah. Well, sometimes you need to have that psychological background when teaching middle schoolers.
Yeah.
I went in for education, almost switched to psych.
But that's what we have you here is because of your big background in psychology.
And so much has changed since I was there. What I say, the DSM manual is up to version 5 right now.
That's okay. We'll still pick your brain. You know all about this. And you hide bodies.
Not
and
with
ceilings.
nice pick, though.
No,
And
thank you. Not with the
That's a
ice pick
callback.
lobotomy.
That's a deep cut. Like, you have to be one of our students to understand the comment about bodies in the ceilings. Sorry, Carrie.
There's one upstairs.
In a bag, allegedly.
We don't talk about that one.
I always told my students I hid the bodies of bad students in the ceiling.
And my classroom has red splotches. I did a maroon, like, sponge paint design on my walls because I was allowed to. And so I said, that's just the blood dripping over.
Oh, okay.
So it was kind of nice. We scared the 7th graders before they even came to 8th grade. So a couple of times I'm going to toss this back at you, Penny, because you have the psych background. Because there are some things I did research on. I can research day and night, but I don't have the understanding that you would. So thank you for being here. Now, the plan is for this to be a 2-part series, but I'm worried that it might end up being 3 parts, which is not a problem.
Yeah.
But right now I'm looking at it being 2. So let's go ahead and get started on Lizzie Borden. And I'm going to start, PukwuPJ. I want you to imagine this. Okay?
I'm ready.
Okay. It is a hot, humid, sultry day
Sultry.
in New England
Yeah.
as we begin this story. The air feels like a sauna, and heat mirages are dancing off the sidewalk.
Sultry dances?
The heart of summer. It is August 4th, 2 days after Penny's birthday. At just about midday. Suddenly, a well-dressed, distressed Victorian woman of high society comes running down the path, screaming that her father is hurt and needs a doctor immediately. This woman is none other than the well-known Christian lady who's a friend of yours, Lizzie Borden. How do you react? No, it's not one of those. Choose your adventures.
What do you do now? Playing D&D. I roll perception.
It's the click, ignore her and walk away, or
I would be peace out. I'm ignoring you.
I roll a 4. She looks fine. You continue down the
It's
street.
just a flesh wound.
She's probably crazy. She's a female in the Victorian
You
time
toss
period.
3 cents at her.
She's not a witcher.
Let me get the body and put it in my ceiling.
Oh, there you go.
I have a little bit of space left, but not much.
I need to add it to my collection.
Oh, boy. My bag is full of clothes. Anyway. All right, so we know a lot about Lizzie Borden. So let's get into the childhood of Lizzie Borden. Take it away, Carrie.
Lizzie Andrew Borden was born on July 19th, 1860, in Fall River, Massachusetts, to Andrew and Sarah Borden. She was the youngest child of 3 children. Emma was born first in 1851. She would have survived to adulthood. Alice, the middle child, was born in 1856, but she passed away at only 2 years old. According to accounts, she died of hydrocephalus. It was most likely congenital. There is also a discussion I found about many people in the family having brain issues and dying of hereditary diseases. This may be the reason for Alice's short-lived life and death.
And actually, when I was doing research, when we talk about Sarah, a lot of the documents say that she died of uterine congestion, but there was also a spinal issue too. So and you talk about, people marrying the rich people. At some point, you're going to have a lot of intermarriage or something. So I wonder if that's part of it.
What is wait, what was it again?
Uterine congestion.
Do you know what that is or no? Because I
well,
have no
it's the
idea. Because it
Victorian
sounds
time
like
period.
really weird.
Her uterus was congested. Obviously. I was
Obviously.
coughing.
I know,
It's
that's
just
where
all
my
stuck
brain
up.
goes. I'm like, the uterus has lungs?
Does it need a tissue? Get some Mucinex.
Achoo!
It sounded really nasally.
Oh my goodness.
Well, so much of that time period, too, if you look at the Victorians, the men would just blame it on female body issues. Oh, you're having a menstrual period? Oh, well, then obviously you are just hysterical.
Yes.
We didn't have modern anything at that time period. So my guess would be that maybe she'd had a miscarriage and it didn't kind of clear out correctly. They didn't have D&Cs back then. So could that have been it? Maybe. I don't know. But yeah, uterine congestion. It also could have been a terrible cancer, right?
True.
There's a pelvic congestion syndrome,
Ooh.
a common cause of chronic pelvic pain in women of reproductive age. Pain that is intermittent or constant, lasting for 3 to 6 months.
No, thank you.
But why call it congestion?
Regardless, I don't want that.
Me either.
Everyone, please go to your gynecologist. Anyway,
Except for PJ.
Yeah, well, I'll call him up
you can go.
tomorrow.
here you go. Good job, honey. Anyway, so I wondered, if we're looking at Alice having passed away, And just the comment about Sarah and what was on her death records, and some people in her family, I wonder if there was some kind of scoliosis or something that was pervasive in the family. But they seem to have a child like every 5 years, because you have Emma, then Alice, and then you have Lizzie. So I wonder if they were spacing the kids out or if there were issues in between.
Well, we're going to be talking about some triggering things later, like abuse and stuff like that. I wonder if she was abused also.
We don't know, yeah.
Because if you are, I'm going to use my words carefully, because raped, like abused that way, things happen down there. You know, you get trauma, and who knows.
And scarring.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and it could be that she was so sick that, incest happened because she couldn't. She was just so sick.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the conversation we're going to have too, unfortunately. So again, lots of triggering going on.
Yes.
But as I said a little bit later, it seemed that tragedy started its pursuit in Lizzie's life, and it just kind of continued because Sarah would pass away when she was only a toddler. Then added to this, it didn't take long, actually only 3 years, for her father to even remarry. His second wife was, by some accounts, their maid. Others, we just know that her family was pretty poor because there were some issues in the Durfee family. But her name was Abby Durfee Gray. And so we'll go into her in a little more detail later. But he marries her, and I would assume it's the Victorian time period. He probably just married her to be a housekeeper and a mom for the kids. It was very common practice.
And he didn't have to pay her.
Well, there you go.
Yep. Yeah. And he was a little bit of a cheapie.
Yeah,
a little bit of a Scrooge?
Yes.
Smidge.
How can I save some money?
Will you marry me? Great. Here are your children. All right, so who was Andrew? Which, by the way, who names her daughter Lizzie Andrew Borden? That's just mean.
Well,
I wanted a boy.
Obviously.
Yeah, like for all the 9 months leading up to the birth. Oh, how's Andrew doing today? And
I just feel like
Andrew's coming this morning.
It could have been Andrea. Like, you could have changed it.
No, it's Andrew.
Okay, sorry, Andrew Borden. My bad.
And maybe this was to create a bond between the father and daughter.
Oh, look at the psychologist coming out already. Tell us all about Andrew then, Penny. Go ahead.
All right. He was of English and Welsh descent, grew up in a very modest surroundings, struggled financially as a young man, despite being the descendant of wealthy and influential local residents. In fact, he was the 8th generation of a long line of rich men. But his father had been unable to maintain the family money. Andrew's father was one of the few Borden men who had not retained the wealth associated with the family. He was a fish peddler. Andrew, not wanting to follow in his father's footsteps, began as a carpenter's helper. Eventually, he became a partner with Frank Almy in a casket company.
That's so lovely, by the way.
I don't see anything wrong with that.
You need it.
Absolutely.
Especially by the 1865. You need a couple of those, right?
Mm-hmm. Ceilings aren't that
That's
big
right.
to
Yes,
hold the
they are
bodies.
not. Yeah. Structural issues with that. But anyway.
Well, they were very into death and death culture. Okay, they sold Crane's patented casket burial cases. He eventually prospered in the manufacture and sale of furniture, as well as those original caskets, and then became a successful property developer. Andrew Borden was a director of several textile mills and owned considerable commercial property. He was also the president of Union Savings Bank and a director of the Durfee Safe Deposit and Trust Company. Is that the same name as her?
They were all part of the high social class of that area.
What an unfortunate last name. By
Durfee.
The way. Yeah.
Durfee.
It makes me think of Officer Doofy.
Yeah. That's it. I knew him. Like, it sounds familiar.
Another deep cut.
At his death, Andrew Borden's estate was valued at $300,000, and some reports would move that up to $500,000. Obviously, this was a lot of money for the time. He was well on his way to being a millionaire. Mr. Borden was also known for his clothing. Summer or winter, he could be seen in his black double-breasted Prince Albert and string tie. He was also known for his love of money and, like Scrooge, worked 14-hour days, but didn't really enjoy much of his money.
And during my research, I learned that probably because he was seen as, the Scrooge of the area, there were rumors that I hope are not true, that he was actually cutting off the feet of the people that they were putting in the caskets, because then he could make the caskets just a little bit shorter.
Save some money.
Yeah. I hope that's not true.
How can I save some money? Let's see. I'll marry my housekeeper. I'll cut people's feet off.
I mean, who's gonna look at the feet?
But if you think about it, that's not too much to chop off, because usually when they die, they put their feet up right in the casket. Mm-hmm. So it's like 6 inches.
Well, you can't make a big difference where somebody would look at it and go,
He wasn't this short.
yeah.
Yeah.
Just like how. And then, like, where does he keep the feet? In the ceiling? No.
No,
Penny
I
does not.
was thinking maybe they're just like tucked on top of the stumps.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's true. We
you
have them
know.
at the bottom. All right. Well, obviously a rumor and never substantiated. So, anyway.
I just want to say, though, I had a string tie when I was a little kid, and it was a 4-leaf clover, and every St. Patty's Day I got excited to wear it. I thought it was the coolest thing.
Aw, You're such a nerd.
String ties are so hideous. I don't know what I was thinking.
You were thinking you were cool and grown up.
I thought it was so... I'm like, I never saw one of these before.
So ridiculous. All right. But as we already mentioned, despite his wealth, Andrew was known for being very frugal. So just imagine Scrooge, if you will, listeners. Like, for example, the biggest comment that they have over and over on anything you read, their houses just did not have any indoor plumbing, which at the time period would have been common for the higher class. So I believe that there was like one running, like in their second house. I think the basement actually had some running water, and that was it. So very much an old-fashioned house. They also didn't have electricity, which was a big no-no because everyone wanted electricity. It was so cool. So the house they lived in, both of them lived in the affluent area, but the wealthiest residents of Fall River, which was the third biggest town in New England at the time period. Fun fact. Yeah, so they all lived what they called the Hill, because it's where all the rich, preppy people were. It was far away from those disgusting immigrants.
Oh, we can be up in our tower and looking down at all the little people.
Was there a betrayal at the house?
Well, obviously, no, because their house wasn't on the hill. And there you go. It's the betrayal of the house beneath the hill.
Under the hill.
Under the hill.
Underhill.
Oh, boy. Another deep cut to Lord of the Rings. All right, I'm loving this. But all of Andrew's cousins, family, they all lived on the hill, but he refused to move anywhere from 2nd Street, which was the second nicest street, but he just refused to move.
Aptly named.
Obviously, yes. And that street was quickly becoming like inundated by Irish Catholic immigrants. Now, New England is known for being Protestant because obviously we're all coming over from England. We don't like those Catholics. So having the Irish Catholic show up was actually kind of offensive. And so a lot of the people who are a part of the upper crust were disgusted because those Catholics were there. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, okay, thanks. But there's a big story about how Lizzie and her whole family hated the Irish Catholics. They also hated the Portuguese that were coming in too. So these immigrants who are Catholic are starting to kind of take over their area, but he's still refusing to move from this house.
And it's worse that they were Irish. No Irish need apply.
Well, interestingly, their later housekeeper was Irish, but Abby refused to learn Bridget Sullivan's name. They called her Maggie because their former housekeeper was named Maggie. So they hire Bridget and they're like, oh, listen, you're Irish. I don't care. You're dirty. And I don't like learning your name. So you're Maggie.
I dub you Maggie.
And it probably helped them save even more money.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, I did read somewhere that that's kind of like the common name that they gave Irish maids.
Mm-hmm. Well, look at them, the Molly too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Maggie and Molly, yeah. Well, in any case, talking about the religion, time period, New England, okay? We had the Women's Christian Temperance Union that had formed, and the sisters, so Lizzie and Emma, followed the ideas of temperance. So that means that alcohol is bad. Straight up. Don't like alcohol, but anything is too much. If it's in excess, it's bad for you. So they said, enjoy things, but don't go too crazy. And the father would have believed that too. I have money, but I'm not going to use it all or go crazy because it's against my religion. So I like to say that the women's temperance movement also promoted the idea that some things should be avoided altogether. And one example, like I said, was alcohol. So this presence within the community helps put into perspective the Borden family as one of contradictions, because Andrew Borden was worth, depending on what you're looking at, because people said he was worth different amounts. He was probably worth more than $6 million upper crust by today's standards. Yet despite this, he was known to pinch pennies, even against wishes of his daughters. Although if they begged enough, he actually would buy them things that they wanted, but he was never nice to Abby, fun fact. Until the whole house thing, which we'll talk about next episode. So again, he would not afford that really nice, lavish life. No plumbing, no electricity. And he stubbornly refused to follow any big, luxurious trends. Just refused. So, however annoying and aggravating, though, the family did, in fact, stick together, which I think is interesting, but maybe also part of the time period. I don't know.
I don't know. Fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a movement for women to start becoming themselves, but I always tack back to like what I've read as an English teacher. It's Victorian time period. I think of A Doll's House by Henrik Ibsen.
A woman on her own would not get far.
Oh, The Awakening by Kay Chopin.
Yeah.
That's a good example. You know, she wants to divorce her husband, but she has no money, so she moves into a house like just around the corner, pretty much. You know, and then she ends up killing. Oh, spoiler alert! Ends up killing herself because she can't stand that time period and the constraints on women. The idea was like either you marry and have babies, or you become a person who gets to be independent, but everyone ostracizes you. There was no in between. And then A Doll's House, similar kind of situation for Nora and her husband. So I think like for Lizzie and Emma, their rule was you stay home because you're old maids. You know, you're spinsters. Where else are you going to go? So speaking of that, now as mentioned, Lizzie's real mother passed away when she was a toddler. Upon the close of her death, though, Lizzie's mother, Sarah, begged Emma, the eldest, to look after Lizzie, or baby Lizzie as they called her, as a mother would. So in their birth mother's absence, the oldest child of the family, Emma Lenora Borden, again, she gets a girl middle name, just saying, so as to fill her mother's dying wish, took to raising baby Lizzie.
Even though she was nearly a decade older, the two were said to have been close. They spent a great deal of time together throughout their childhood and well into their adulthood, including through the tragedy that would befall their family. Emma was known to be a very sweet individual, always smiling and always very loving. There was also a side story that she once fell in love with a man of a lower class and was therefore not allowed to marry him. This was the same for Lizzie. There may have been many reasons as to why Lizzie remained unmarried, like she was not a great beauty. Honestly, it would be polite to only call her homely.
She was very, like, strong and brutish looking.
Which is really funny because if she was on the bigger side, that means she kind of like went in excess, which was against the religion.
Well, I think she was just tall and beefy.
You think she was just
I
broad?
think of Encanto with the one sister who is, like, big and strong, you know? Have you seen the pictures of these girls? Like, they are not...
No.
Yeah,
no.
sorry.
Also, to her father, no suitor was acceptable. He viewed them as inferior and would chase them off as a fortune hunter.
This dichotomy of an absence of love from their father with the disallowance of love or marriage, and also the sheer frugality of Andrew versus his wealth, would linger into their adult lives. And people kind of say, like, this is where the backdrop of anger comes from. You won't let us marry. You won't show us love, or if you're showing us love, it's the wrong kind of love. You won't let us use money, but you have a crap ton of it. We can't even have our own house to live in. This is ridiculous. So you have this anger, this annoyance, this deceit, right? And so I think murder could easily happen.
Right. I mean, I can just say that even in our time of day where we live in, I would snap.
Yeah. Oh, and that's why Penny's here, because I just love the mind of a human and what delayed discovery is. So I think it's just interesting. But I mean, I feel like if I'm living this long and all these things happen, I would snap to. I hold that I think Lizzie probably did it. I mean, there are lots of ways to say she didn't because, you know, the no running water in the house to me already points like, my gosh, there's no way that she could have killed these people, because how did you wash off all that blood twice? Like, you just can't.
Right.
But I could see her doing it because I'd be a little angry too.
Right.
But how about that stepmother, Abby?
Okay, so Abby was married into the family only 3 years after Sarah's death. She was 37 years old. Hey.
I know, exactly. Thank you.
When she married Andrew, and she was considered to be an old maid when they married. Well, yeah, obviously.
After 22, that's it, you're done.
Her family had fallen onto hard times and was mostly without money. She desired respect and social status, but was often regarded as daughter of a pushcart peddler. To marry someone of Andrew's station was unexpected. Many at the time speculated Andrew had proposed because he was looking for a housekeeper and someone to raise his daughters. Again, we said, like, someone for free, too. This would not have been an uncommon practice by Andrew, but it was surprising he married below his station to obtain a housewife.
But she hung on her last name, the Dufree last name, just as a way to kind of get herself promoted to that. So,
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Depending on what you read, either Emma and Lizzie loved Abby or hated her, or maybe only barely tolerated her. According to FamousTrials.com, a story in the Boston Daily Globe reported rumors that Lizzie and her stepmother never got along together peacefully, and that for a considerable time back they have not spoken, but noted also that family members insisted relations between the two women were quite normal. The Boston Herald, meanwhile, viewed Lizzie as above suspicion. From the consensus of opinion, it can be said, in Lizzie Borden's life, there is not one unmaidenly nor a single deliberately unkind act. The relationship between Abby and her stepdaughter Lizzie will always remain something of mystery. There's no documentary evidence of abuse or neglect. Several persons, however, including prosecution witnesses in that murder trial, reported that the relationship was less than loving, and many speculated that the murder of Abby happened because of the hostility between the two. To add to this contention, Lizzie had in fact called her stepmother mother, but had stopped about 5 years before the fight.
And Emma never called her mother at all, which I think is interesting. She only ever called her Mrs. Borden. Yeah. Again, like, you know, with Lizzie, she would have been a toddler, you know, 3 years old, whatever. So having a mom, she's going to call her mother, but whatever happened, I mean. Well, thank you, Mrs. Borden.
Yeah.
Oof.
That's something.
My daughter does that, and we're having a conversation. All right, so that's the background on Emma a little bit, but mostly on Lizzie, on Abby, on Andrew. So the main players in this. And this is where we're going to go into the kind of heavy-hitting stuff, because the current theories that exist, and this has been done by lots of psychologists. It's not without, like, you know, some data and some thought to back it up. So we are promoting things that people are really spending time on. There has to be a trigger warning at this point, because there is a heavy possibility of incest, of delayed discovery for children, and collusion possibly with Abby. So I think it's important that we mention that from the get-go. Again, trigger warning here at this point, just because we are promoting someone, not promoting it, we're deep diving into something that is currently getting a lot of analysis. So for this, I'm going to be looking at a document by American Heritage called What Made Lizzie Borden Kill? Okay. And it delineates some rather dark but legitimate possibilities. So in the last 30 years especially, a lot of research has been done on family violence. In 1962, an article in the Journal of American Medical Association documented a battered child syndrome. And then after that, there became the battered woman syndrome. I am not really familiar with it. The title, I think, kind of gives away Penny, but let me know if I'm missing anything in here. It says, this new focus on physical violence and neglect has turned up alarming data on the number of children who are sexually abused in the home and the impact of that abuse on their adult lives. Then there was a well-respected 1985 study by the sociologist David Finkelhor, who put the figure of victims of incest closer to 1 in 5 persons who have suffered from it. Part of this almost inconceivable number has come about because of a broadening definition of incest. So today, incest is described as sexual abuse by someone close. So it could be a relative like a step-parent, babysitter, family friend, whom the child would be expected to trust and obey. But current statistics also suggest the extent to which incest may have been underreported in the past because it wasn't spoken of. So that is about incest, but is there anything specific about battered child or battered woman syndrome that, like, we need to know going in, Penny?
They simply snap at some point. They can no longer take it.
Okay. Is it kind of like a dog? I hate to call, like, people dogs, but I think, like, you know, I think about animals who finally fight back when you're sitting in a corner, and at some point, like, if you're smacking a dog, it's going to fight back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or is even that wild animals, like Siegfried and Roy and their tigers.
Right.
You know, everyone said,
that elephant, was that in Jersey that ran and, like, he couldn't take the abuse anymore?
I didn't hear about that.
You don't know about the elephant story?
Elephants are sweet. How dare they? Anyway.
But yeah, like, my parents always said, like, never get a license for like wild animal taming, because you cannot tame a wild animal. At some point, it's going to turn on you. And I always said when I was a kid, I'm like, what about Siegfried and Roy? We're like, well, look at the tigers. And then,
whoopsie.
Sure enough.
So the link between sexual abuse and parricide was seen in 1982 when 16-year-old Richard Yankee killed his father after enduring years of physical abuse and witnessing the physical and sexual abuse of his mother and sister. According to Paul Moniz, a lawyer, the Yankee case was the first parricide to attract intense national attention since Lizzie Borden. The link between abuse and parricide was also seen in 1986 when a Long Island teenager named Cheryl Pearson paid a classmate to murder her father. When she was caught, Pearson told authorities that she had been abused by her father since she was 11 and that she feared he was about to turn on her younger sister, which is a common time for young girls to snap because they can take it for themselves, but they don't want their younger siblings to suffer.
Yeah.
more people are not afraid to discuss many of these topics in modern day because we want to fix these problems.
Yeah, but that wasn't the case in the 19th century. I think it's interesting, too, because you look at Cheryl Pearson, she was a teenager, right? Do you think that for her father, maybe she was looking too much like an adult, and that's why he's going to turn on the younger sister?
Yes, because some of these men prefer the younger, and, well, they're basically pedophiles.
Yeah.
Some of them do. Some of them will just molest them all the way into adulthood because it becomes the substitute for their wife. There are several kinds of these sickos.
If it's true, and I didn't go into a lot of detail and do a lot of research on Cheryl, but if it is true that he was going to turn, you know what? Good job, Cheryl. Sorry. I just want to say it. Like, I believe in Texas justice sometimes. Jen from down Texas, my step monster, she'd be like, yeah, that's right. So,
there was the Aerosmith song, Janie's Got a Gun.
Oh, yeah, there it is. Yeah.
It's all about that.
Excellent choice. All right, so I want to look at like our modern day, like because as you said, like, we talk about it more now because we want to fix the problem, but that wasn't the case in the 1800s. So I want to flash back because we're talking about Lizzie Borden in the 1860s to 1880s and 1890s. So in the 19th century, the connection between sexual abuse and homicide was simply not part of the public consciousness, and for ladies who spoke out, only terrible recourses would come. So in one example, a woman poisoned her stepfather because he was abusing her. When her case went in front of the justice system, they committed her to the Taunton Lunatic Asylum. It's like, my dad was abusing me. Yeah, you crazy. Here you go to the asylum. And we've already discussed lots of asylums, not a place to be.
Right. And I believe more women were in asylums than men ever were, and children, because they just weren't listened to.
Well, and I wanted to focus on Pennsylvania because we're so Pennsylvania-centric. But if you look buried in the records at the Magdalen Asylum, which is a home for fallen women, I hate that term, but they were in Philadelphia at the turn of the century, there are reports of women who were seeking refuge from their fathers. So they went there because it was safer than being in their homes. And of course, at that point, it's not good for them because now they're going to be labeled a fallen woman. So in these places, the administration told the girls to simply work and pray hard as a way to overcome these problems. It's your fault, not your father's fault, your stepfather's fault. And then for other victims, they would try to run away as a way to resist these issues. Of course, by doing that, you would end up kind of entering social services and you'd be marked as a delinquent girl or as a prostitute.
It's crazy, the victim blaming.
Yeah.
It's disgusting. And then there's these institutions that are supposed to help people, but they're just making them so much worse.
Yeah. And I don't want to get on a soapbox, right?
I'm sorry.
No. But I think it's like, we don't want to get on a soapbox, but I think this is centuries of a very similar situation, And I think nowadays we're opening up to the idea of not victim blaming so much. The tide is turning, but look at the hundreds of years, and the best term you can have is delinquent girl. Okay, yeah, sure, she ran away, but there was a reason for her running away.
Even all the pushback during the Me Too movement, 10 years ago when it started up.
Was it 10 years ago?
That doesn't seem
Wasn't it 10 years ago? Well, maybe it was less.
Maybe
but,
it was.
It was
like,
before COVID, right?
It was pre-COVID,
it was
for sure.
Yeah. We're old now. We're like, was it 10 years ago?
10 years ago?
I feel like COVID, just like, it's before or after COVID.
2006.
Yeah.
Really?
Wow. Yeah. So we were in college.
Yeah.
So now we're going to have
I would say
PC
about 10 years
AC,
ago is when it really...
COVID, after COVID.
When it
I feel
really
like that's
kicked
going to be the
in.
new mark is PCAC. That's right.
Well, the problem with the women, Victorian women were considered the keepers of morality.
Yes.
They were the ones that were to keep the men in check. That was their role. They were paragons of virtue. So if a man did something like this, well, the females in his family must not have been doing their godly duty. Ugh. So therefore, they were the bad ones.
Yeah, they were labeled that way. It drives me nuts. Well, I actually said here, victims of the 19th century who did talk about it were not believed or labeled crazy. As recently as 1934, the legal scholar, and this drives me nuts, by the way, John Wigmore, argued in his definitive classic Treatise on Evidence that women and children were not trustworthy witnesses in sex offense cases because they were likely to bring false charges against men of good character. He even discounted medical evidence corroborating their testimony if he was in any way suspicious of the stories they told. So again, like that was less than 100 years ago. to put in context that this guy is writing this.
I wish he was still alive so I can slap him.
Yeah. Like the slim number of cases where that actually happens. Like the most famous one is probably Amber Heard, Johnny Depp, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's
in today's age.
Such, yeah.
Modern,
We were believing him.
Yeah, and that's and that's such a tiny amount of like false accusations compared to the gigantic amount of real accusations that were being made, and the number of actors who just aren't actors anymore. Strictly speaking, Hollywood, like who just aren't working anymore because of all these allegations, and that turned out to be true.
Yeah. When you look at this, like, again, we're building the background as to why Lizzie and Emma, if they were having, like, unfortunate relations with their father, they're not going to go to the court system because...
No one would believe them.
Yeah. And they're not going to run away because what are they running away to? A bad life,
Right.
Yeah.
No chance of getting married at all to anyone respectable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then I moved into 1988 because I wanted to focus on like more stuff on incest just so we can get a better background. So there was work done in 1988 by Linda Gordon, and she said the average age of victims of incest was about 10. About 1/4 of the cases took place in households in which the mother was absent too. So that's 1 in 4, which is crazy. In another 36% of cases, the mother was in a weakened state by illness, which think about Sarah, she was. Or there was a fear of violence from the male in the household. So added to this, in the early 1980s, Denise Gélinas, a co-founder and co-director of a medical treatment center for incest victims in Springfield, Massachusetts, she documented certain conditions under which incest is most likely to occur. A father may turn on his children when the mother is unavailable, or if he has suffered or she has suffered a huge loss. The likelihood of incest can also increase if there are strong community or religious feelings against extramarital sexual activity. Of course, all of this is seen in the Borden household because of their religion. We know Sarah's sick with uterine congestion, whatever that means. And of course, she also dies when Lizzie's a toddler. They also had a huge loss because Alice had passed away at a very young age, most likely due, because hydrocephalus can come from a lot of issues, but it could have been because of some back problems. You also see that they have this huge temperance belief, so not, too much of a good thing is a bad thing. And this is New England, so sex is bad unless you're married. So you have all of that going on. And so you look at Emma, she was the general age then for incest victims because she's already been primed by her mother saying, take care of baby Lizzie and take over the family household stuff, be the mom. She is about 10 years old. I feel like Emma would have assumed all the responsibilities, and one of those would have been to relieve her father's needs. And what's interesting, too, is Mr. Borden refused help even from his own sister to help with the household and with the children while Sarah was sick. He put it all on Emma. So I find that fascinating. And of course, as Emma grows older, the shift of incest could have moved to Lizzie. But then the big question, PJ, comes back to, what about the stepmother? You've already talked about Abby. Mm-hmm. Where is she in all this? Because you marry her, you think it's going to get better. It's been 3 years since Sarah's died.
Yeah, right? Unless she's literally just being a housemaid.
Yeah.
And doing her thing. So yeah, 3 years after the loss of Sarah, less than that, most people agree that the Borden girls did not respond well to the arrival of Abby. There's no indication that Abby treated them badly, but from the first, Emma refused to call her mother. Lizzie never established a close relationship with her either, even though she was such a young age that Abby could really have become her mother, which is very true.
She called her
we see it
mother
all
for
the
a
time.
bit, yeah, but it wasn't very close, yeah.
The question is, why didn't she? Added to this is the fact that she and Andrew had never had children together, and Abby was well within the age to bear children. 37 is not too old to get pregnant.
Shout out, we could totally have a number 4.
The absence of children...
Auntie Penny, Auntie Carrie, yes, number 4.
With me?
Get another cat.
Get another cat!
Yes. I got you a puppy.
Oh, that's true, I have a corgi, right.
The absence of children raises the obvious question, what was happening in the house?
And I agree, yeah. Right? Because we know that Sarah had issues, but she still managed to give birth to 3 children. One passed away, but so why wasn't Abby popping out some babies?
When the family moved to their new home on 2nd Street, it became obvious to the world how little affection existed between any of the family members. The house was basically cut into a duplex, and the family rarely ate together. But Lizzie and her father were the exception. They actually had a very close relationship. For example, she gave her father a gold ring when she graduated from high school, and it was his prized possession. He was even wearing it on the day he died. Well, it seems counterintuitive. This actually could be proof of an ancestral relationship because Lizzie may have seen herself as Daddy's special girl.
I know we're going to ask you about Freud in just a second, but fun fact, he didn't even wear a wedding band.
But he wore the ring that his daughter gave him when she graduated. Shouldn't, like, your parents give you, like, something?
She should,
Right,
yeah,
like-
she should have received a present.
Like, nowadays, it's like, here, I'm paying for college. You know?
Sophie, Eli, Alex, nope.
But, like, something
Unless
like that.
this podcast
Like,
really kicks
like
off.
I got you
Yeah.
some flowers, or, you know, now you can go off and get married. Shoo, out of the house.
Yeah, no.
No.
When I learned that he did not wear a wedding band but wore this ring, I was like, oh my.
That's so weird.
So, Penny, tell me a little about Sigmund Freud here.
He was a strange man.
Well,
Very preoccupied with sex, which was completely unusual for that time period, but quite groundbreaking. Daddy's little girl, Daddy's special girl. Yeah, remember her middle name. I really think Sarah wanted Daddy to love this little girl, and I think that's why the name was there. And what she didn't imagine this sort of love.
now, is it possible that she appreciated the interest her father gave her? Could have been like the Electra complex?
A bit. I mean, there are stories that Daddy bailed her out from possible shoplifting.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, she had a little light finger there.
I mean, for him, as frugal as he is, some stories say he would just tell people, send me the bill, don't say a word, I'll take care of everything. Why would he do that for her?
Yeah.
true.
And that could be her acting out from
Absolutely.
things happening.
That's one of the things children will do when they have a really traumatic home life.
No, on the side of this not being incest, it's also the Victorian time period. So what else are girls doing except walking around the garden reading books? I'm going to go steal something. This is our way of acting out because we're bored.
I'm showing my ankle.
Whoa. You are the reason that your father is interested in you now. Put that ankle away.
How dare you?
Now, that's something else. Like, they were such prudes. Like, when something like this happens, how do you talk to people about it? Because no one would talk about it.
They wouldn't.
You know?
It just didn't exist. Men of
Especially
good high
if-
class would not do this.
Yeah.
In their religion too. How dare you say these words to even think these words to even
Yeah.
have them come out of your mouth?
And you can't lie. Jesus is listening.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oof. Anyway, so I know we're not claiming that incest happened, right? But I like that modern psychologists have looked at this. So I want you to kind of go over all the patterns that we see, Penny, and then take it away with all your psychological thoughts. I just love saying psycho Penny. It makes me so happy.
Psycho Penny, I like
Thank you for being here.
Psycho killer.
A practitioner in Psychopenny.
Psycho Penny, yeah. It's new.
Well, I just keep thinking of the absolute repression and suppression of everything. I mean, the wasps, that was it. You suppressed everything. You suffered. Suffering was glorified.
That's very Catholic of you.
It's very waspy.
It's true. It's very waspy. So, for our listeners, what is a wasp?
White Anglo-Saxon Protestant.
There you go.
Not
So,
that
are we wasks? White Anglo-Saxon Catholic?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. We get a name too.
Wasp is not exactly a complimentary name.
Oh. Okay, well, listen.
Yeah. It's pretty derogatory.
Oh, is it? Okay, never mind. I'm not a Protestant. I'm sorry.
So if we
Being a Catholic isn't nice either in this time period. So, I mean,
yeah, you guys are really into suffering.
yeah, well, also
I mean,
we're Catholic.
it's not good in this time period
No.
either.
No.
We're Catholic. We know everything that people say. It's okay.
But there was a long time where, if for the Protestants, suffering was great. Terrible things happen to you. Well, the Lord is teaching you a lesson. You must submit to this. You must be grateful for this.
Be Job.
Yes. You must be Job. Not Job's wife. Okay, so we view all of these patterns. Long-time absence of wife, mother, ages of the girls, autocratic, strict father, who may or may not have been affectionate to one, but to nobody else. The isolation, definitely. Mrs. Borden hardly ever went out, and the girls couldn't do anything unless it was related to church. The failure of the family to bond as a unit when the new Mrs. Borden moved in, the timing of the move to the new house, the structure of the house, the special relationship with Lizzie and Daddy, tensions, all suggest inappropriate things or unhealthy things.
I mean, at least unhealthy.
Very unhealthy. Okay.
Now, in the next episode, we're going to delve into the murder itself. So I'm not going to waste much time. I mean, we've already kind of glossed over that, but we're going to focus on that then. So we'll see if there's 40 whacks and all that kind of stuff and the really bad police reports of the time. And we're going to look at the trial. So that's why I'm worried this might be 3 parts because we might get really stuck in the murder.
The trial is crazy.
Yeah. So this could end up being a 3-parter. It really could. But our plan for this episode is to set the groundwork of why it actually happened. So it's good that we have our psychologist here. So for Lizzie, there is the modern day discussion is she may have been suffering from delayed discovery. I had never heard of this before doing research because, again, I don't have a psychology degree or a background in it. I mean, we take 2 courses in college?
Yeah. Well, I took 4.
Show off. I took Psych 101, and then I took child psych or something like that. I forget. Some kind of secondary psych. Anyway.
My favorite was abnormal psych.
So PJ was there for you to do tests on?
He wasn't born yet.
Oh, ouch. Whoopsie.
Remember, I'm one of the feral Gen X.
I'm a Gen X too.
Well, you were feral with me.
I was born in 1979. I'm a Gen X.
1967, 2 years before the first landing on the moon.
67? She's 20 years older than us.
Yep.
But I don't act like it.
No, you do not. Your hair looks fantastic, too. You got purple in it.
Absolutely.
You're just a cool Gen Xer.
Drives
man.
my mother crazy.
That's the point of Gen X's, to drive their mother crazy. Hi, Mom.
Oh, boy.
I can see her pursing her lips at me right now.
Goodness.
You're discussing things that are inappropriate.
I didn't raise you like that.
Yes, she did.
Oh, you didn't, Mom. I learned it on the streets.
It's because of you that I do that. No, don't blame your mother. So what is delayed discovery, Penny? I've heard that term has been tossed around a little bit, but I know there's ideas of suppressing memories, but take it
the
away.
repressed memories, we've got to watch out for that because that was discredited where there were some unethical therapists planting seeds of the thought that you were abused, or there was the satanic panic a while back.
Ah, yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Where supposedly these children recalled memories of abuse and being, tortured for the sake of Satan, whatever. But
They're playing a lot of D&D, according to the Catholic Church.
Yep. Reading Harry Potter before it was cool.
that was before all of that. The satanic panic.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I was.
Well, we weren't allowed to read Harry Potter, apparently, based on the last pope. Very bad of you to read Harry Potter. But anyway, so I was looking at some of the psychologists, and they said that delayed discovery has a time bomb quality because you're pushing that molestation, that incest down and kind of deeper and deeper into you. And so something small kind of elicits this big, crazy, mushroom cloud response. They also said that the median age is a woman in her 30s, and Lizzie was 32. So with that being said, and you say that we shouldn't look at repressed memories, could it have been delayed discovery, though?
Oh, absolutely. And being in her 30s, she's realized the prospect of marriage is pretty much off the table. She has nothing to look forward to. She's stuck in this situation where her only choices are to be the good Christian Sunday school teacher, work in the temperance union. She had nothing else.
Yeah.
And she was in this house that was not very comfortable and having to live with a stepmother she didn't like. She had nothing.
Yeah.
She was totally ready for a meltdown at this point.
Yeah, Penny, I don't know about you, but when I was in college throughout my psych classes and everything, the term trigger this is what a trigger was, you know, like nowadays trigger just means something that makes you feel bad, you know, or and sometimes it's a legitimate trigger. I don't want to downplay it for people who have real triggers.
But I think we also were educators and we know a lot about autism too. So we know what triggers are. Yeah.
And like, there's so many people who use the word just to say like, oh, I don't like to hear about that because it makes me feel bad. You know, it's like, that's not a trigger. A trigger is when like, it literally triggers you to do something like unprompted and out of your control, you know, and who's to say that? I had a student, if you said the words calm down, he would immediately open palm swing at you like across your back and left a mark. And so like...
Was he emotional support, autistic?
Both.
Okay.
And you could tell that he was probably abused, you know, acted out a lot, and his parents or someone would say, now calm down, as they, like, strapped him to a chair. I don't know. But, you know, like, as they did something to him, and they probably repeated calm down to him all the time. And so you had to be careful never to say that phrase, even if you're just joking, like, whoa, calm down there. You know, like, you can't, like, if he heard those words, you're going to get hit.
Even if it was, like, in the hallway passing and somebody said it to somebody else.
He would follow that person and smack him. Yeah, like...
That's sad that he probably... Oh.
And, like, that's a trigger, you know? Like, when something serious does, like, changes you. And who's to say that this is not... You know, what we're going to get into next episode is not a result of a trigger. Like Penny said, a meltdown, you know, like prompted by some trigger. You know, maybe it was a specific thing, or maybe it was just built up over time. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's just like, you know, someone said something maybe and it just brought up this repressed memory. And then boom.
Carrie and I have a theory, actually. Because of the frugality of the father. And it's a pretty common thing, a thread you'll see throughout, is the buying of some property or the giving of property that may have spurred this on. But what I find interesting is, and I actually put the quote in here for Lizzie, because in the days before the murder, I actually have a quote here. It says, Lizzie herself reported confused feelings to her friend Alice Russell the night before the murders. She said, I feel depressed, as if something was hanging over me that I cannot throw off, and it comes over me at times, no matter where I am. When I was at the table the other day, the girls were laughing and talking and having a good time, and this feeling came over me, and one of them spoke and said, Lizzie, why don't you talk? Also, in the days leading up to the murders, you see her having this, like, I don't know if it's like going to call it depressive episode, but she said that there's this feeling of something kind of overcoming her.
Becoming more introverted.
Right, and she's viewing these girls having a good time, and she's like,
I
don't know how to have a good time.
Yeah.
It could be a little jealousy or envy.
Maybe they're so innocent and happy, and she can't even have that.
And she was supposedly known for some dissociative times where she would just, we would say, zone out for a while. So, yeah, these are definitely red flags here that something was going to happen for her to actually verbalize it to somebody else.
Right. She was trying probably get help in a way. Tell me, is this something bad? Is this something everybody feels? You're my friend. Tell me the truth. But you don't talk about it either.
Well, and like Alice, what is she supposed to say?
I know.
You know? I feel like at that point, I'm like, yeah, there's probably something wrong. Want a cookie?
Right.
What do you say?
Yeah, when you're in one of those depressive episodes too, like, and you know you're not talking to people and you should be, you still don't want to talk to people, you know, like even when you know you should be, you just don't want to.
Right.
And to build off that, I would say it's probably even more scary for a female to talk about it, because I've already laid the groundwork here about like what happens if you do talk about it.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
You know, so I want to talk about it, but I can't, because you're going to throw me away and like lock the door, toss away the key. So
she had no hope at this time.
Yeah.
There was nothing. It was never going to get better. It could only get worse.
So what's also interesting is the fact that women who are molested in childhood actually choose rather surprising professions in adulthood. And so at the statistics, they speak like loudly to me. The majority of them become engaged in what we call the helping professions. So like teaching is one example of that, and nurses. So in the 1800s, the counterpart would have been church activities and teaching, because you couldn't even be a nurse back then, right? So you see, she was doing both of those. She was super involved in church activities, and she was a teacher. Now, I actually made a comment about this because we've already mentioned the anger towards Catholic immigrants, the Irish and the Portuguese, but we know that Lizzie was an unmarried woman of privilege. Some privilege, anyway. Daddy gave her some money. Her connections to prominent religious activities molded her into what we would profile as a Protestant nun. I had never heard that term before because we know what nuns are in the Catholic faith. But I was like, Protestants use that word? But she was also a part of a class of money women emerging in that time period who realized that if they had money, they didn't have to marry. They could instead choose to kind of pursue good works and sort of careers, but not really. But up in the helping profession, they could. So you could be a teacher until you wanted to retire. You didn't have to be a teacher until you got married and popped out babies. And so you see that turning of like femininity almost where you can be your own person, sort of.
Within the strict confines.
Yes. Yeah.
Of what was acceptable for
exactly.
women.
Yeah.
You can have this, but it's what's in the box.
Ish.
You can only have what's in the box.
Yeah. Ish.
But in the box, as a teacher, you actually had some measure of control. Mm-hmm. So,
because now you're independent. Mm-hmm. Yep. So she was super involved in the community. She taught Sunday school. She assisted in all the Christian organizations. She helped with social activities. She even served on the board of the Fall River Hospital, which is pretty cool. And again, she had money, so of course she was on the board. She actually acquired the public profile as Fall River's most prominent unofficial Protestant nun. But what's interesting, as I mentioned, she had anti-immigrant feelings towards the Portuguese and the Irish because they were Catholic, but she taught Chinese immigrants at her church. My guess is because they weren't Catholic. I don't know. But she had no problem teaching the Chinese, but she wasn't very happy with the Portuguese. And actually, during the time of the murders, the first people the cops go for are the Portuguese because they have darker skin. And they're immigrants. It wasn't Lizzie because she's a very nice female of that time period. So she was very much a part of like this weird like dichotomy of the movement in that time period. But I did want to mention the Protestant nun thing because I had to look it up. But it does raise the comment, as I mentioned, of the changing society, which is women who were choosing to remain single. Now, we know from the past that Lizzie and Emma tried to get married and Dad said no. But historians have documented how the label spinster obscured the diverse reasons for women to stay single. So instead of being that ideal virtuous Victorian person who was forced to, be married and have children or stay perfectly morally and physically pure, those are the two options you get, be a nun or be married and have kids. Some ladies realized if they had their educational opportunity, like being a teacher, they could then be an adult and kind of take on their independence in some way. So Lizzie did do that, but she was also deeply invested in the feminine discussions and the social movements of the time period, which some people don't talk about. So she was actually busy with the reform of women's rights. So when suffrage, that was just kind of starting. And so she was actually pretty busy. What I find interesting is while she was involved in women's suffrage, it's all of her very feminine background, her Victorian perfection that would allow her to literally get away with murder. Because there was this belief that since she was a fine lady of Victorian high moral standing, that she could never have done this because it simply wouldn't happen via a Victorian female like this. She was a Christian lady. It's like, honey, she was going to all these underground movements about being a free, independent woman.
But at the same time, realizing she would never attain that.
Yeah. Oh, well, unless she took some drastic measures. Possibly. Allegedly. Allegedly. But
Is the family still going to come for you?
But if you look at the jury, I know at the time period, Carrie, we're looking at it, could women be on a jury?
No.
Yeah, it was an all-white, all-male jury, and they were all Christian, patriarchal men.
Older.
Yep.
They were very much older men.
Yep. They saw women as the weaker sex, and of course, with the class structure of New England's higher society, she, I think, literally got away with murder. Like, I think so. But there isn't enough, crime scene evidence to point it on her, if that makes sense.
But the violence of the crime.
Ooh, yeah. So give us a little snippet for next time. The violence of it. How does that show us psychologically that it was or was not her?
Your random robber is going to knock you out or shoot you and then run off. For somebody to get that close and to destroy the face.
Of the father, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because Abby was from the back, right?
But she was still in the head.
Yeah.
Still hitting the head. So that speaks to so much rage and uncontrolled anger.
Oh, it was personal.
it was more than personal.
Oh, yeah.
She gave her dad, 41 whacks, according to the rhyme. Not in real life. He only got, 14? Mom got 18?
Something like that.
It was enough to actually break a tooth apart. There's more.
As a dental assistant back in my time, that's pretty hard.
No, of course there's me who can chip a tooth on plastic, so...
But for somebody to have that much rage and anger to do that, they had to have been really suffering. Mm-hmm. There had to be something that provoked.
And I think that's what raises the question, could it have been Lizzie? Because she had the anger. But I heard a comparison, because I read a lot of books and watch a lot of videos and listen to podcasts. But when the person killed Abby, that was a lot of hacking. And it had to be a hatchet, not an axe, due to like the conditions of what had happened. Which means you're really up close and personal. You watch Psycho, and he's wearing a raincoat.
Right.
So,
American Psycho?
American Psycho.
Yeah. But you see, like,
the
all...
knife in Psycho.
But yeah, right, that's true. But, like, you watch and go, why, yes, it is the raincoat. But you see him putting down, like, new newspaper and plastic because there's so much blood spread. But if you look at if Lizzie had done it, she would have been covered in blood. And so the one comparison this crime scene expert said was, imagine she took, like, ketchup and just poured ketchup over her entire head and her entire body. She'd have to wash it off without indoor plumbing. God
Unless
bless
they had
her.
it in the basement.
But from what I understand, like, it was a very small trickle, like, water. But, like, it's the Victorian time period. You got to wash your hair, too. And then you have to dry it on the hottest day of summer and somehow get it back up.
I wonder if there was a stream she could have jumped in.
Walking outside.
Yeah, but, you know.
Not close enough.
No, not where she lived.
Could have been seen.
Yeah.
Because I remember looking at the map, like, there's a drawing online, I don't know which website, of, for the trial. Mm-hmm. Of the house and where this person lived and that person lived. I just don't remember if I saw a water source.
Yeah, but it was also like the middle of the day, so like people would have seen it. But then like
She's several blocks away from
a river or
the Taunton River, but it's blocks away. Okay. It is far.
And so then like you have her having to get all cleaned up, and then she does it again to her dad, and then she has to go clean up again before she runs outside and says, "My daddy needs a doctor." You know, she didn't
and
have
their
that
clothing
accent.
was quite complicated, and hairstyles were complicated.
Yeah. You can tie me in and out.
Yeah,
of course. And I'd be like, "No, I'm done." So I think there's a lot to unpack for our next episode. Like, could she have done it? But I do hold that there was a lot of anger, at least centered toward her father.
Of course, because if you put yourself in her shoes and it happened to you, you're like, yeah, I'd be angry. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would want to like get away from this. I can't run away because I don't know where Dad's money is because he won't give it to me.
He'll give it to Abby's family, though.
Yeah, you know.
By the way, the Borden house is a bed and breakfast.
Yes,
it has been. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, and the house, I'm not sure if they've renovated it very much, but when I mentioned earlier, maybe it was one of you mentioned earlier, that the house is like a funky shape. It was a house that didn't have hallways. So like it was up and downstairs constantly to go anywhere in that house. I'd be so annoyed. Yeah. But that could have also been the time period too. If you think about like, because down in Antebellum South, like you had these big open verandas to walk up because women walked on one side, men on the other.
Right.
So you would not see those ankles because it gave man impure thoughts. Yeah.
How dare those ankles?
I'm just like, really? That's the part? Like, I'm like, it's not even good looking. I hate feet. So, like, feet smell, not, I'm out. It's the Shark Tank. And for that, I'm out. Well, anyway, it is with that discussion that we will end part 1 of Lizzie Borden. Next week, we'll discuss more background stories on Andrew Borden to give us a deeper understanding of him as a father and possibly why he was murdered. And we'll also go over the infamous murder of Andrew and Abby in detail. So kind of little snippets of the hatchet and the blood, but there's a lot to unpack with that. We'll go over the trial and then the later lives of Lizzie and Emma Borden. So what happened to them after the trial, which is why I think it might be 3 parts. But regardless, so listen in next week for either the conclusion or the continuation of this Lizzie Borden series. So I just want to say thank you, ladies, for being here. It has been a true pleasure. PJ, you too.
Yep.
I feel like you're one of the ladies right now, though.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. It's a compliment. So, Penny, for your first time on, how was it?
It was a lot of fun.
Do you want to come back?
Yes, I do.
Yay!
Too bad, because you're gonna.
We need a lot of psychologists. Carrie, always a pleasure to have you here.
I like it here.
Oh, update on your house. We forgot to do it at the top of this.
Well,
People, we still have ghosty things happening at Carrie's house. She has to sage it.
I have to sage it. I have those marks on my arms again.
Yes. And
They
what
have
else
come back.
happened?
I was cleaning the dishes, my back up against the rest of the house, and I swear, and I hear Tom walking down the stairs, and you know, like you could feel the presence of your husband when he's in the room. You just, when you're together so long, you kind of like know that somebody's there. And I'm talking and I'm talking and I'm talking, I'm having a conversation, and I'm like, why aren't you answering me? And I turn around and there's nobody there, and I walk over to the stairs and I'm like, hon? And he's upstairs in his office working away. I'm like, were you downstairs?
Wow.
There was not a single soul. My kid, nothing. The cats were upstairs sleeping. There was absolutely nothing.
See, we got to sage that house. And at Penny's house, she found our newest mascot.
He is a one-winged pterodactyl that I found while cleaning, which is a rare event in my house. But I have no idea how it got there because my youngest is going to be 29.
What's with those feet?
Those are some interesting feet.
I think those are supposed to be little claw
These
grabbers.
little claws. See? It's like this.
So we're going to post a picture. We decided that he lost his wing. How?
He was fighting with Mothman.
Yeah, Indrid hurt
Obviously,
him.
yep.
Yeah. So he's going to replace the Jersey Devil for us because I find this one-winged pterodactyl fighting the Mothman more believable than the Jersey Devil.
How dare you?
Have you been to the Pine Barrens?
We have. And I didn't see a single thing.
You saw a lot of pine trees.
Creepy pine trees, yes.
Oh, yeah, they grow so weird.
Well, they have to because
Yeah,
it's
the
the type
sand.
of pine.
And,
Yeah.
Don't forget, next Sunday we are drawing for the giveaway, so please get your name in.
We'll repost that picture. We'll
Yes.
put it at the top. Yep. So thank you all for listening to Well House Exorcism. Find us on Instagram as Well House Exorcism, on Twitter X as wellhouse_exorc, or on Facebook under Games Overboard because we're a subsidiary. Please feel free to hop on our website as well, gamesoverboard.com. Please email us. We want to hear from you always. Please email us. And as PJ said, please get on Facebook and like, comment, do something on that picture so we can get your name in for that giveaway. It goes across all three of our different podcasts, Danger and Dice, The Well House Exorcism, and our flagship, Games Overboard. So lots of cool stuff in there. Right? Am I right, honey?
Darn right.
All right. So as always, think spooky thoughts. Pardon me. I must seem to you so stupid. Why is the property of the woman who commits murder and the property of the woman who commits matrimony dealt with alike by your law? Francis Power Cobb, Criminals, Idiots, Women, and Minors.